is so extraordinary to be back on stage here, not backstage, which is a lot more comforting. This is kind of exposed and frightening, and also to be here with these extraordinary Marshall scholars who know a hell of a lot more than I do about the gap between the two cultures and their common language. But I'm going to try to give you a little gloss on that with a story that I will take from the book that I wrote when I left Speakeasy. And because it's close to Halloween, I'm going to make it kind of a spooky story. The sort of a spooky story that you would have perhaps listened to or seen on an old television show, which you can still see on YouTube, called The Twilight Zone. So imagine, if you will, I can't do a good Rod Serling impersonation. Imagine, if you will, a deserted house, an English Gothic villa on the shores of the Thames, crenellated, empty, dust in the corners. No one has lived there in years and years and years. It used to belong, back in the 18th century, to an English MP called John Barker Church and his beautiful American wife, Angelica Schuyler Church, who was the sister of Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton. Yes, that very Hamilton. After they left and it passed on to other people, it eventually fell into the hands of a film studio where, in fact, the movie Rocky Horror Picture Show, which some of you may remember, a campy mad scientist in a creepy castle musical. It was a huge cult hit in the 1970s. It was filmed there. And then I guess because creepy, campy mad scientist musicals are not something you can actually make a living with, the studio went bust. And enter, in the traditional way of the 21st century, a developer. And a developer was going to turn it into luxury condos. In order to do that, he had to strip it down to its absolutely bare bones. And at the time that this was going on, I had begun researching Pride and Pleasure, and I wanted to see where Angelica had lived. So I was in England. I tracked down the developer, and lo and behold, they said, well, yeah, you can see this because all the demo work has been done, and the project manager will be happy to show it to you if you just get on the train and go to this charmingly named town, Maidenhead, and you will be able to see it. So I thought, okay, fine. I got on the train. I got to Maidenhead. Now, we're back to Twilight Zone again. Imagine, if you will, the biographer in a car with a total stranger. Driving along the road, we get to a chain link fence with a padlock gate. We're out of cell phone range of everything. The stranger gets out of the car. He opens the padlock gate. We drive through. He drives through it. He padlocks it behind us. And it's at this point where, if we were in the Twilight Zone or even in Rocky Horror Picture Show, I would be imprisoned or worse by the mad scientist, which is what the developer would really turn out to have been. But in fact, as you could see, that didn't happen because I am standing here. So, in fact, of course, Down Place turned out to be the key to Angelica Schuyler Church. I did not know it at the time, but it did. Angelica was a part of the American ruling class. She was the daughter of Philip Schuyler, an American Revolutionary War general who was a pal of George Washington's. He was an incredibly wealthy man, owned vast swaths of New York State. And Angelica was an incredibly charming woman. She had great allure. Hamilton's best man at his wedding, a man called James McHenry, who later became Secretary of War, was one of many men smitten by her. And he said, she charms in all companies. So when Angelica and her husband, Angelica had married this an English war profiteer who had come to America before the war, made bundles and bundles and bundles of money, supplying the American armies and their French counterparts. And after the war, he and she went to London, where he proceeded to make more and more money and to buy himself a rotten borough so he could be elected as a Whig to Parliament, which he was. And Angelica expected that she would be a great leader of society as she had been in America. After all, she had all this money. They had a gorgeous house in Sackville Street. She had beautiful, glamorous clothes. She spoke, I think, 3 languages. She had beautiful handwriting, which was apparently a big deal back then. Her husband had gone to St. Paul's School, which had been attended by no less than the Duke of Marlborough. So surely they were going to be just fine, right? Well, unfortunately, although they had a box at the opera and at the Drury Lane Theatre, although they went to the Royal Academy openings, although the Prince of Wales, who was kind of like the Prince Andrew of his day, came to their parties, they didn't get any royal invites the other way. What happened was Angelica got asked to a party at the prince's mistress's house. That's not the same thing. Charles James Fox, who was the leader of the Whig Party, would borrow vast sums of money from her husband, from Angelica's husband, John. But Charles James Fox's patronesses, the Duchess of Devonshire, she was even his campaign manager and his good friend. She never called on the churches. So Angelica is kind of wondering what is not happening? Why is the magic not happening for me? And the problem is that she didn't mind the gap. She didn't understand there was a gap. There was a secret language of English high society, and she did not know what it was. Her father was indeed a millionaire, a general, all these important things, but he was an American. John, her husband, was a mere businessman. He made his money by working. He was what the Society magazine, Town and Country magazine, called one of those funguses who have sprung from hotbeds of rapine and rapacity. I mean, their pals were all people like American expats, artists, and theater people. And you can see this is not going to get her very far over there. So in 1785, they bought Down Place, this beautiful villa near Windsor. It was near George III's palace, his castle. But unfortunately, of course, George III was enraged when he discovered that this Whig politician had bought a house near him. He just could not bear. I mean, some people thought it was what had drove him crazy, but it probably didn't. Angelica offered to give a debut party for the daughter of a deceased general because she figured if she did that, she'd be able to use the ladies' guest list because she was very well connected. But that didn't work. Nothing worked. She had a very comfortable life. She had many friends, but not the ones she really longed for. When in 1797, she and her husband returned to New York, where, of course, they ran into another language gap. They had brought with them their gold plates, their French chef. Angelica would receive guests in her boudoir wearing her negligee. These were not things you did in New York in the late 1790s. And her husband completely blew it. He had been able to make vast sums of money in London, but he came to America. And what happened? He could not read the economic signals of the late 1790s, and he went bankrupt by 1810. So poor Angelica is kind of buffeted about by all this. And indeed, she succumbed to heart disease and proclaiming to her sister, "I hope soon to be quite well," she died in 1814, which is really quite sad. Instead of an alpha girl success story, we've got this pathos. And I was very surprised by this. You know, all the people who write about Angelica, many of them her contemporaries, all got her own letters saying, "I'm this great success. I'm doing this. I'm having this party. I'm going there." And they believed that she had succeeded in conquering the heights, but she hadn't. Historians, all of whom seem to still be in love with her, mostly they're men. They're all male historians. They all want to date her. And they just love Angelica. And they're so charmed by her, they think she must have been this huge success. So I was wondering, what's going on here when I could not find a mention of her in any letters by the Duchess of Devonshire or anyone else? Why is this happening? And it wasn't until I went to Down Place that I really understood what was going on. Louisa Catherine Adams, who was the wife later of John Quincy Adams, had been brought up in England and was a half English girl. And she knew Angelica at this time when Louisa, was in her teens. And she said later in her memoirs that Angelica always seemed to be acting. And that was the thing. When I saw at Down Place these beautiful rooms that look like a stage set, when I saw at what had used to be the stables, the actual sound stage where you would make a movie, I realized that Angelica was indeed acting. She was acting in the play that she thought was her life. But somehow, when she moved to England, the script got lost in translation and she didn't have her lines down right. When she spoke them, her audience didn't understand what she was saying, which is a great sadness, really. But it's something I would never in a million years have figured out if I hadn't gone to Down Place. So that's my spooky story, and I thank you very much.